rain-slicked streets, roaring engines, and the flash of chromia. Most people crossed to the other side when they saw the Hells Angels riding in. But not Mary Jacobs. Mary wasn't tough. She wasn't bold. She was 52, a widow, a part-time diner waitress who baked pies on weekends for her neighbors. She lived in a rented little house on the edge of town and carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had known loss but chose kindness instead of bitterness. That night, she had only gone downtown to pick up groceries. She wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble, however, came barreling right in front of her. Outside the store, she saw two men in a heated argument. One was huge, broad-shouldered, leather vest, tattoos climbing his arms, clearly a biker. The other was thinner, meaner-looking, jittery like a cornered animal. The words escalated into shouts. Then, in a blur, Mary saw the glint of a knife. She didn't think. She simply moved. When the blade lunged toward the biker's ribs, Mary shoved forward. The knife caught her side instead. She gasped, the world spinning, and collapsed to the ground. The biker, later she learned his name was Rex, captain of the local Hells Angels chapter, caught her before she hit the pavement. "Jesus Christ, lady, why would you do that?" he muttered, his voice breaking. Her lips trembled, but her words were steady, because no one deserves to be stabbed in the street. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, antiseptic air, and pain. Mary drifted in and out of consciousness, but one thing kept repeating in the nurse's whispers: the bikers are here. By dawn, 300 motorcycles lined the parking lot. Engines idled, chrome gleamed, leather jackets formed a wall around the hospital. To townsfolk peeking from windows, it looked like an invasion. But inside, it wasn't intimidation. It was gratitude. Men who had built reputations on fear now carried flowers awkwardly in calloused hands. Women in patched vests brought casseroles and blankets. A soft-spoken giant posted himself outside Mary's door like a sentinel, refusing to move even when staff protested. Doctors whispered, "Who was she? Why would they care so much?" The truth was simpler than anyone guessed. For men used to fists and knives, betrayal and revenge, Mary had given them something none of them expected: unconditional compassion. She didn't know Rex. She didn't know him. But she stepped in anyway. When Mary woke days later, her first sight wasn't a nurse or doctor. It was Rex himself, sitting in a chair too small for his massive frame, head bowed. "You're awake," he said gruffly, relief hidden in the gravel of his voice. "You shouldn't have done that." Mary smiled faintly. "And yet a broken bar, here we are." He shook his head. "You don't get it. We're not a broken bar, good people. Nobody takes a knife for us." Her reply was quiet but firm. "Everybody deserves a chance to be seen as human. Even you." Rex looked away, blinking hard. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to him not as a leader, not as a threat, but as a man. When she was discharged, the parking lot thundered again at 300 bikes roaring as one. But this time, it wasn't to frighten. It was to escort. The townsfolk lined the streets, watching in disbelief as the procession rolled slowly behind Mary's modest car. People who had once crossed the street to avoid the bikers now saw them in silence, softened by the sight of their unlikely bond with a woman who had nothing but kindness to give. Months later, the diner where Mary worked had a new regular crowd. Bikers squeezed into booths, boots creaking on tile floors, ordering her pies and leaving tips big enough to cover her rent. But more than money, they left respect. Rex himself never forgot. He started showing up at community drives, food banks, even helped repair playground swings. People whispered that the Hells Angels had softened. Rex would just shrug and mutter, "It's what Mary would do." Mary never called herself a hero. She only ever said the same thing, "Sometimes the world gets hard. But if you have the chance to choose kindness, even on Sia, you might change more than one life." And she had. One small act of selflessness had shifted the course of 300 men hardened by a lifetime of steel and scars. It wasn't power. It wasn't violence. It wasn't fear. It was the courage of a simple woman and the knife she could that proved humanity can ripple outward further than any roar of an engine. Mary's recovery was slow. The knife had gone deep, leaving her with stitches and a scar that tugged whenever she moved. But what surprised her wasn't the pain, it was the company. Every day, without fail, bikers filled the hospital waiting room. Nurses were nervous at first, but soon they realized these men weren't there to cause trouble. They took turns carrying her trays, fetching water, even sitting with patients who had no family. A nurse whispered one afternoon, "It's like the whole hospital changed since you came in. Even the roughest-looking men a broken bar, they smile now." Mary only smiled back. Sometimes people just need permission to show their better selves. One evening, as the sun set to orange over the town, Rex came to see her alone. His voice was rough, but his hands fidgeted like a boy caught doing wrong. "You should know, a broken bar, I wasn't exactly a saint out there," he confessed. "I've hurt people. Taken what wasn't mine. Led these men into things I ain't proud of." And he paused, shaking his head. "You jumped in front of a blade for me. Me. The least deserving man in this whole town." Mary looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. Maybe that's why it mattered so much. Rex swallowed hard. It was the first time in decades anyone had seen tears wet the eyes of the Hells Angels captain. When Mary was finally well enough to leave, the bikers organized something no one in town had ever seen before. They blocked off Main Street, and not with fear, but with banners and balloons. The engines roared, but this time the sound carried laughter, cheers, and a strange kind of reverence. Mary, frail but standing tall, was escorted home like a queen. Neighbors peeked from porches, clutching their children, stunned by the sight of hardened men bowing their heads respectfully as she passed. And then came the most unexpected twist. Rex walked up her front steps with an envelope in his hand. "We all chipped in," he muttered, almost embarrassed. "It ain't much, but a broken bar your house, it's paid off now. You don't owe rent anymore." Mary gasped, hands trembling as she opened the envelope. Tears filled her eyes when she realized what they had done. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Rex gave a faint smile. "Just keep making those pies." Months later, something even greater began to grow. Inspired by Mary, the bikers started the Jacobs Fund, named after her. What began as a small collection jar at the diner turned into a foundation raising money for families in need, rebuilding storm-damaged homes, even paying medical bills for strangers. The same men once feared as outlaws were now showing up at schools with backpacks for kids, organizing toy drives at Christmas, and quietly fixing roofs for elderly neighbors. Every time they were asked why, their answer was the same: because Mary did. The scar on her side never fully faded, but Mary wore it proudly. It was proof that even in the darkest places, one act of courage could shine a light. And as Rex often said to his men, whenever doubt crept in, "If a simple woman can take a knife for me, then maybe I can take a step toward being the man she thinks I can be." Diaris's closing note, and so the woman who had once lived quietly on the edge of town became the heart of it. She never asked for fame, never wanted attention. She just chose kindness, and that choice rippled out to 300 men, and then to an entire community. Because sometimes, it only takes one brave heart to change the sound of the world, from the roar of anger broken bar to the roar of hope.